Hopefully here in a second it'll start recording. There it goes. Good afternoon and welcome to Miss Walker's Story Time. Today we are going to start the book, How to Train Your Dragon. Now, this is the book that fabulous animated movie was made from. All right, so this is the original story that we're going to read. And my nephew has read almost all of these books and loves them. And he recommended it to me to read to you guys. And I thought, sure, why not? So this book is called How to Train Your Dragon, The Heroic Misadventures of Hiccup the Viking, as told to by Christina Caldwell. She's the author. So I'm going to show you some pictures so you can see some cool things from the book. All right, let me move my mouse so that I get things to go away. There we go. So there's some pictures he drew, and it says novices to the hairy hooligan tribe. And then over here lists my chapters. And then here is the cool map of the island. I know it's kind of backwards for you guys. Sorry about that. I'm hoping they have ebooks of this series at the public library, and I've requested this. So if it does that, I'll be able to show you the ebook. So that's the map. And then here is Hiccup, the drawing of Hiccup. And it says, note from the hero. There are dragons. There were dragons when I was a boy. There were great grim sky dragons that nested on cliff tops like gigantic scary birds, little brown squirrely dragons that hunted down mice and rats in well-organized packs, preposterous huge sea dragons that were 20 times as big as the blue whale who killed just for fun. You will have to take my word on it, for dragons are disappearing so fast they may soon become extinct. Nobody knows what's happening. Are they crawling back into the sea from whence they came, leaving not a bone, not a fang on earth for men of the future to remember them by? So, in order that these amazing creatures should not be forgotten, I will tell this true story from my childhood. I was not the sort of boy who could train a dragon with a mere lifting of an eyebrow. I was not a natural at this heroism business. I had to work at it. This is the story of becoming a hero the hard way. So, apparently Hiccup became a hero the hard way. So, here is the first chapter, and that drawing, I thought you might like to see how he draws Goober the Belch. This is chapter 1. First, catch your dragon. Long ago, on the wild, windy isle is another name for island, of Burke, a smallish Viking with a longish name stood to his ankles in snow. Hiccup Hinderus Haddock III, the hope, the heir of the tribe of the hairy hooligans, had been feeling sickly ever since he woke up that morning. 10 boys, including Hiccup, were hoping to become full members of the tribe by passing the dragon initiation program. They were they were standing on the bleak little beach at the bleakest spot of the whole island. A heavy snow was falling. "Pay attention!" screamed Gober the Belch, the soldier in charge of teaching initiation. "This will be your first military operation, and Hiccup will be commanding the team." "Oh, no, not Hiccup," groaned Dog's Breath the Durang, and most of the other boys. "You can't put Hiccup in charge. He's useless." Hiccup Hendris Haddock III, the hope and heir of the tribe of hairy hooligans, wiped his nose miserably on his sleeve, and he sank a little deeper into the snow. Nobody would anybody would be better than Hiccup, sneered Snot-Face Snout-Lout. Even Fish Legs would be better than Hiccup. Fish Legs had a squint that made him blind as a jellyfish, and an allergy to reptiles. "Silence!" roared Gulber the Belch. "The next boy who speaks has limericks for lunch for the next 3 weeks." There was absolute silence immediately. Limericks were these bits of like worms, and a bit like snot, and a lot less tastier than either. "Hiccup will be in charge, and that is an order," screamed Gober, who didn't do noises quieter than screaming. He was a 7-foot giant with a mad glint in his one working eye and a beard like exploding fireworks. Despite the freezing cold, he was wearing hairy shorts and a teeny weensy deerskin vest that showed off his lobster red skin and bulging muscles. He was holding a flaming torch with one gigantic fist. So here's the drawings along the sides of the pages. Hiccup will be leading you. Although he is immediately completely useless because Hiccup is the son of the chief, that is the way things go with us Vikings. Where do you think we are? The Republic of Rome? Anyway, that is the least of your problems today. You are here to prove yourself a Viking hero. And in ancient tradition of the hooligan tribe, that you should, Gobbler paused for dramatic effect, first catch a dragon. Ooze. Suffering scallops, thought Hiccup. Our dragons are what set us apart, bellowed Gobber. Lesser humans train hawks to hunt with them, horses to carry them. Only Viking heroes who dare tame the wildest and most dangerous creatures on earth. Gobber spat solemnly into the snow. There are three parts to the dragon initiation test. The first and most dangerous part of the test of your courage and skill at burglary. If you wish to enter the hairy hooligan tribe, you must first catch a dragon. That is why, continued Gobber in full volume, I have brought you to this scenic spot. Take a look at the wild dragon cliff itself. The boys tipped their heads backwards. The cliff loomed dizzily above them, black and sinister. In the summer, you could barely see the cliffs as dragons of all shapes and sizes swarmed over, snapping and biting and sending up all calligraphy of noise that could be heard over Burke. But in the winter, dragons were hibernating and the cliff fell silent, except for the enormous low rumble of their snores. Hiccup could feel the vibrations through his sandals. Now, said Glover, do you notice those four caves halfway up the cliff, grouped roughly in the shape of a skull? The boys nodded. Inside the cave would be the right eye. Inside the cave that would be the right eye of the skull, there is a dragon nursery, where there are, at this very moment, 3,000 young dragons having their last few weeks of winter sleep. Ooh, muttered the boys excitedly. Hiccup swallowed hard. He happened to know considerably more about dragons than anybody else. Ever since he was a small boy, he had been fascinated by these creatures. He spent hour after long hour watching dragons in secret. Dragon spotters were thought to be geeks and nerds, hence the need for the secrecy. And what Hiccup had learned about dragons told him that walking into a cave of 3,000 dragons was an act of sheer madness. No one else seemed too concerned, however. In a few minutes, I want you to take one of these baskets and start climbing the cliff, commanded Gobber Belch. Once you are at the cave entrance, you are on your own. I am too large to squeeze my way through the tunnels that lead to the dragon nursery. You will enter the cave quietly. And that means you too, Warthog, unless you want to become the first spring meal for 3,000 dragons. Ha 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 ha. Gobber laughed heartily at his little joke, then continued. Dragons this size are normally fairly harmless to man, but in these numbers they will set upon you like piranhas. There'll be nothing left of you, fatso like you, Warthog, just a pile of bones. And your helmet. Ha ha ha. So, will you walk quietly through the cave, and each boy will steal one sleeping dragon, lift the dragon gently from the rock, and place it in your baskets? Any questions so far? So here's their basket that they're going to steal their dragon from, and put their stolen dragon into. In the unlikely event you do wake the dragons, and you would have to be idiotically stupid to do so, run like thunder for the entrance of the cave. Dragons do not like cold weather, and the snow will probably stop them in their tracks. Probably, thought Hiccup. Oh well, that's reassuring. I suggest that you spend a little time choosing your dragon. It is important to get the correct size. This will be the dragon that hunts fish for you and pulls down deer for you, and you will catch the dragon that will carry you into battle later on when you are much older and a warrior of the tribe. But nevertheless, you want an impressive animal. So, a rough ride would be choose the biggest creature that will fit in your basket. Do not linger too long in there. Linger, thought Hiccup, in a cave full of 3,000 sleeping dragons? I, I need not tell you, Gober continued cheerfully, that if you return to the spot without a dragon, that is hardly worth coming back at all. Nobody fails this task. Anybody who fails this task will be put into immediate exile, and the Harry Hooligan tribe has no use for failures. Only the strong belong. Unhappily, Hiccup looked around the distant horizon. Nothing but snow and sea as far as the eye could see. Exile didn't look too promising either. Right, said Gobbler briskly. Each boy take a basket and put their dragon in, and we'll get going. All right, guys, if you're just joining us, be sure you mute your mics for me. The
Okay.
boy the boys rushed to get their baskets, clattering happily and excitedly. I'm going to get one of those monstrous nightmare ones with the extra expendable claws. They're really scary, boasted Snoutlout. Oh, shut up, Snoutlout. You can't, said the Speedy Fist. Only Hiccup can have a monstrous nightmare. You have to be the son of a chief. Hiccup's father was Stork the Vast, the fearsome chief of the Hairy Hooligan tribe. Hiccup sneered Snoutlout. If he's as useless at this as he is at bushball, we'll be lucky if he gets one of the basic browns. The basic brown was the most common type of dragon. It was a serviceable beast, but without much glamour. Shut up and get into line, you miserable tadpoles, yelled Gobber the Belch. The boys scrambled into their places, baskets on their back, and stood at attention. Gobber walked along the line, lighting the torch that each boy held in front of him, with a great flame in his hand. In half an hour's time, you will be a Viking warrior with your faithful servant at your side. So here's another image for you guys. This, it says at the top of the thing, Viking dragons and their eggs. So this is information about the Viking dragons and their eggs that I think Hiccup has written down on a sheet of paper for him.
What chapter I'll be on?
We're on still on the first one.
Okay.
So let me back up to start our next sentence. A serpent at your side or breakfasting on wooden Valhalla in dragon's teeth in your bottom, screamed Gubber in a horrible enthusiasm. Death or glory, yelled Goober. Death or glory, yelled Eight Boys back fanatically. Death, thought Hiccup and Fishleg sadly. Gober paused dramatically with a horn at his lips. I think this could possibly be the worst moment of my life so far, thought Hiccup to himself. As soon he waited for the blast of the horn. And if they shout much louder, they're going to wake up those dragons before we even start. Papar! Gobber blew the horn. Sorry, not the dragon, the horn. There we go. Chapter 2, Inside the Dragon Nursery. You probably have guessed by now, but Hiccup is not a natural Viking hero. For a start, he didn't look like a hero. Somebody like Snoutwood, for instance, tall and muscularly, covered in skeleton tattoos, and already had the beginning of a mustache. This consisted of a few yellow, scraggly yellow hairs clinging to his upper lip, and that were deeply unpleasant to look at, but still impressively manly for a boy not yet 13. Hiccup was on the small side. He had a kind face, and that was almost entirely unmemorable. He did have heroic hair, which was bright red and stood up vertically, however much you tried to wet it down with seawater. But nobody ever saw that because it was hidden under his helmet most of the time. You would never have picked Hiccup out of those 10 boys to be a hero of the story. Snout Lout was good at everything and a natural leader. Dog's Breath was tall as his father and could do amusing things like farting in tune to Beric's national anthem. Hiccup was absolutely average, the kind of unremarkable, skinny, freckled boy who could easily overlook in a crowd. So, when Gobbler blew the horn and moved out of sight to find a comfortable rock to sit on and eat his mussel and tomato sandwich, Snout pushed Hiccup out of the way and took charge. So, here's some pictures from the sides of the story. Okay, listen up, boys, he whispered in a fascinating fashion. I'm in charge, not the useless. And anybody who objects gets a knuckle sandwich from Breath of Durban. Ugh, grunted Dog's Breath, pounding his fists together in excitement. Dog's Breath was Snoutlout's chief sidekick and great big gorilla of a boy. Bash him, Dog's Breath. I'll show you what I mean. Dog's Breath was delighted to oblige. He gave Hiccup a shove and sent him sprawling head first into the snow, then ground his face in it. Remember, boys, don't type in the chat while I'm reading. I'll give you a chance to talk at the end. Pay attention, hissed Snoutlout. The boys dragged their eyes away from Dog's Breath and Hiccup to pay attention. Rope yourselves together. The best climber should go first. Well, that's you, of course, Snoutlout, said Fishlegs. You're the best at everything, aren't you? Snoutlout looked at Fishlegs suspiciously. It was difficult to tell whether Fishlegs was laughing at him or not because of his squint. That's right, Fishlegs, said Snoutlout. I am. And just in case he had been laughing at him, bash bash him, Dog's Breath, while Dog Breath pushed Fishlegs down to join Hiccup in the snow. Everybody started roping themselves together. Hiccup and Fishlegs were the last to be tied on. Behind the flushed and triumphant Dog's Breath. Oh, brilliant, muttered Fishlegs. I'm about to enter a cave full of man eating reptiles, tied up to 8 complete mannocks. If we get to the cave, said Hiccup nervously, looking at the sheer black cliff. Hiccup put the lighted torch between his teeth to leave his hands free and started climbing after the others. It was a perilous climb. The rocks were slippery with snow, and the other boys were thoroughly overexcited and making the ascent far too quickly. At one point, Clueless missed his footing and fell, luckily, into Dog's Breath, who caught him by the back of the trousers and heaved him back on the rock again before he brought the whole lot of them down. When they finally made it to the mouth of the cave, Hiccup looked down briefly at the sea pounding at the rocks below and swallowed very hard. Untie the ropes, ordered Snoutlout, his eyes popping with excitement at the thought of the dangers to come. Hiccup goes into the cave first because he is the son of the chief, he sneered. And if any dragons are awake, he'll be the first to know it. Once we're in the cave, it's every man for himself. Only the strong can belong. Although he wasn't your usual mindless thug of a hooligan, Hiccup wasn't a wimp either. Being frightened is not the same as being a coward. Maybe he was as brave as everyone else there, because he went to catch his dragon despite knowing what dragons are like. And when he climbed into the perilous mouth of the cave and found what was inside was a long, twisty tunnel, and he still went down, despite not being too keen on long, twisty tunnels with dragons at the end of them. The tunnel was dripping and clammy. At times, it was high enough for the boys to walk upright. Then it would close down into a narrow, claustrophobic holes that the boys would only squeeze through, squirming on their stomachs with flares held in their mouth. After 10 long minutes of walking and crawling to the heart of the cliff, the stench of dragon, a salty stink of seaweed, and old mackerel heads got stronger and stronger until finally it became unbearable. The tunnel opened out into an enormous cavern. The cavern was full of more dragons than Hiccup could have ever imagined existed. Hiccup started sweating as he looked around at the pile of after pile of animals draped over every surface, even hanging upside down from the roots like giant bats. They were all fast asleep, most of them snoring in unison. This was a sound so loud and so deep, it seemed to penetrate right into Hiccup's body and vibrate through his soft insides, turning his stomach and bowels, forcing his heart to beat at the same slow dragon pulse. If one, just one of these countless creatures were to wake up, it would raise the alarm to the others, and the boys would meet a horrible death. Hiccup had once seen a deer that wandered too close to the wild dragon cliff, torn to pieces in a matter of minutes. Hiccup closed his eyes. I will not think about it, he said to himself. I will not. None of the other boys were thinking about it. Ignorance can be useful in such circumstances. Their eyes were popping with excitement as they walked through the cave, hands over their noses to keep from out the revolting smell, looking for the biggest dragon they could find that fit in their basket. They left their torches in a pile at the entrance. The cavern was well lit by glowworms, huge sluggish animals dotted here and there that shone a steady dim fluorescence like a low watt light bulb, and the flame huffers gave off extra little bursts of light that flickered on and off as they breathed in and out. Predictably, most of the boys headed towards the pug uglies of the dragon worlds. Snout Lout made a big fuss about grabbing a vicious looking monstrous nightmare, smiling nastily at Hiccup as he did so. Snout Lout was the son of Baggerly Bum the Bear Belly, Stork Vast's younger brother. He was intending to get rid of Hiccup sometime in the future, so he, Snoutlight, would become chief of the Hairy Hooligan tribe. And a gruesome, terrifying chief, as Snotlout meant to be, would need a properly awesome dragon. Warthog and Dog's Breath got into a loudly whispered fight over a grockle, a heavily armored brute with fangs like kitchen knives sticking out from a number in such numbers that it couldn't keep its mouth shut. Dog's Breath won and managed to drop it in his he was trying to bundle into the basket. The weaponry of the beast made a horrible clatter as it landed on the floor of the cavern. The grockle opened its evil crocodile eye. Everyone held its breath. The grockle stared ahead. It was difficult to tell from its blank expression whether it was awake or fast asleep. Hiccup realized in the agony of suspense that the gossamer thin third lid was still down, and there it stayed for a few heart stopping moments until it slowly closed the upper eyelids again. Amazingly, not one of the other dragons woke up. A few grumbled grumbly, making themselves comfy again. But most were in such a stupor that they barely even stirred. Hiccup let out his breath. Maybe these dragons were so dead to the world that nothing would wake them from their slumber. So here's another uh, piece from Hiccup's journal about the Gronrich dragon. He swallowed hard and muttered a prayer to Loki, the patron saint of sneaky exploits, and edged forward cautiously to grab the most unconscious looking dragon he could get out of this nightmare as fast as he could. It was a little known fact that dragons grow colder the deeper they sleep. It was even possible for dragons to go into a sleep coma in which they were icy cold with no obvious pulse or breath or heartbeat. They can stay in this state for centuries, and only the highly skilled expert could tell if they were looking at it if it were alive or dead. But the dragon who was awake or lightly sleeping would be very warm indeed, like bread that had just come out of the oven. Hiccup found one about the right size and fairly cool to the touch and maneuvered it into his basket quickly and carefully. It was a very basic brown, but the moment Hiccup could not have cared less. Even it was barely half grown. It was surprisingly heavy. I did it. I did it. I did it. He chanted happily to himself. At least he wasn't going to be the only boy in the class who didn't have a dragon. Everybody seemed to have gotten themselves one by now and were making their way quietly towards the exit. Everybody except for Fish Legs, who was already covered in a bright, itchy rash and was at that very moment approaching a pile of knotty, tangled nabblers on very loud tiptoes. Fish Legs was the burst at Burgley, then Dog's Breath. Hiccup stopped dead in his track. Don't do it, Fish Legs. Please don't do it, he whispered. But Fish Legs was fed up with Snout Lout's taunting and being sneered and jeered at. He was going to get himself a really cool dragon. that all the other boys would respect. Squinting hard, he could barely see the pile of dragons, his eyes streaming. Catching himself violently, Fishlegs reached down towards the bottommost dragon, took one leg in his hand, and gently yanked. The entire pile came crashing down in a furious tangle of limbs and wings and ears. Every boy in the cavern gave a horrified gasp. Most of the nabblers snapped crossly at each other before settling back down to sleep. One brute, bigger than the others, opened his eyes and blinked a few times. Hiccup, no- Hiccup noted with great relief that the third eyelid was still down. The boys waited for those eyes to close. Then Fishleg sneezed. 4 gigantic sneezes that went echoing through the cavern walls. The big Naggler stared ahead.
Miss Walker, is it almost time?
Almost, but not quite yet. Oh, I lost my place. The big Nabbler still sightlessly ahead, frozen like a dragon statue. But very faintly, an ominous purring sound began in his throat, and very slowly the third eyelid slid upward. Oh, no, whispered Hiccup. The Nadler's head suddenly whipped around to face Fishlegs, its yellow cat eyes snapping into focus on the boys, unfolding its wings to their greatest extent and stealthily advanced like a panther about to spring. It opened its mouth wide enough to show its forked dragon tongue and "Run!" shouted Hiccup, grabbing Fishlegs and dragging him away. The boys ran to exit the tunnel. Fishlegs and Hiccup were the last to get there. There was no time to pick up torches, so they were running in the pitch black. The basket with the basic brown dragon was bumping on Hiccup's back. They had 2 minutes to start on the dragons because it took a while for the first dragon to wake everyone else up. But Hiccup could hear the ferocious roaring and flapping of the dragons starting to pour into the tunnel after the boys. He ran faster. The dragons could move faster than the boys because they could see better in the dark, but they were held up when the tunnel got smaller and they had to fold their wings and squirm through. I haven't got a dragon, panted Fishlegs, a couple of faces behind Hiccup. That, said Hiccup as he scrambled through his elbows, is the least wow of our problems. They're gaining on us. No dragon, repeated Fishleg Stubbers. Oh, for Thor's sake, snapped Hiccup. He thrust his basket into Fishleg's arms and grabbed an empty one from Fishleg's back. Have mine. Then, wait here. Hiccup turned and went back to a bit narrow through where the roaring got louder and closer by the second. What are you doing? Screamed Fishlegs, basically dancing up and down in the spot. Hiccup came back through the hole again a few precious moments later. Fishlegs grabbed hold of his arm to help haul him through. Here's a picture of Fishlegs and Hiccup running through the caves. You could hear the horrible sniffling as it sounded as if the nose of the dragon had entered the end of the hole. Hiccup burred and squealed indignantly. Turned the corner and suddenly they could see light from outside at the end of the final tunnel. Fishlegs went first, but just as Hiccup was kneeling down to follow, the dragon pounced on him with a flap and a shriek. Hiccup hit it, and it fell back enough for him to crawl towards the light. Another dragon, or maybe the same one, sank its fangs into Hiccup's calf. He was so desperate to get out, he dragged the animal with him. As soon as Hiccup's head and shoulders were through the light, there was Gobbler. He grabbed Hiccup under the armpits and hopped him out, the dragons pouring after him. Jump, yelled Gobbler. He as stunned as the dragon with and stunned the dragon with one blow of his mighty fist. What do you mean, jump? Hiccup hesitated and looked down at the Disley drop to the sea. No time to climb down, panted Gobbler, banging a couple of dragons' heads together and bouncing 3 more off his gigantic belly. Jump! Hiccup closed his eyes and leaped off the cliff. As he plunged through the air, the dragon attached to his leg released its jaws with a squawk of alarm and flew off. Hiccup was traveling at such a speed by the time he hit the water, he didn't feel the water at all. It was more like something hard and painful and so cold that he nearly passed out. He sputtered to the surface, amazed to find he didn't appear to be dead, and immediately drenched by a gigantic splash of Gobbler the Belch landing a couple feet from him. Shrieking furiously, the dragon swarmed out of the cave and dive bombed the floating Vikings. Hiccup pulled his helmet as far down as he would go, and the horrible scraping sounds of the dragon's talons raked across the metal. Another one landed hissing on the water right in front of Hiccup's face, then took off again with a screech when it felt how cold the sea was. Dragons didn't like to fly through the snow, and with a relief, Hiccup watched as they flew back to scream terrible dragon insults in the dragonese from the warmth of the cave entrance. Gobbler pulled the boys out of the sea onto the rocks. The Viking boys were strong swimmers, but it was difficult to keep afloat when you had a basket full of trapped, terrified dragons on your back. Hiccup was the last to be saved, and just in time, as the cold was beginning to put him to sleep. Well, at least it wasn't death, thought Hiccup, as Gobbler grabbed him by the neck to rescue him from nearly drowning in the process. But it certainly wasn't glory either. And there's the page of Hiccup sinking into the sea. And that is where we will stop. That ends chapter 2, right before chapter 3. And we will pick up chapter 3 there next week.
Okay, bye bye.